Now, so far in this short semester, you've heard a lot about citation practices and incorporating evidence into your paper. Again, one job of a researcher is to find the research, another is to read it and understand it and think about how it connects to your ideas and let it inform your ideas, but the other is to figure out how to work it into your paper. So we have to think about how to incorporate evidence. Now, in English, we use MLA, Modern Language Association. In other humanities classes, you might use Chicago Manual of Style, you might use APA. In science, you might use the CBE system. So each of these is very discipline specific. That is, the scientists, for example, have the year number really early in the citation because dates are really important in science. How recent is the information? How far back does it go? How far back does the research go? In English, we privilege titles and authors because some of this stuff is thousands of years old and that doesn't change the information. So again, this is very discipline specific, so as you move into your other classes, you'll have another system to learn. So what's important is that you learn how to use a system, how to seek out examples and follow those examples in a particular format. Not that you memorize where the period goes, but that you can look it up and apply it correctly every time. So let's take a look at in-text citations and punctuation. In the first example, I have a quotation that I want to use. I know the author's name and I know a page number. So I'm going to use a signal phrase, also called an introductory tag, to introduce what I'm about to say. Again, this signals to my readers that I'm about to have some information, whether it's a quote, a paraphrase, or a summary, that is not my idea and in fact is somebody else's idea. This can increase my ethos too. It gives me credibility. So I'm going to have Smith writes, and then the quote, and at the end of the quote I have my parenthetical citation and a page number. Note that the page number is all by itself, and that the punctuation is after the end of the parentheses. At the top you're going to see Smith writes, and then a comma. So you might be asking, well, when do I use a comma and when don't I need a comma? Because sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. If the sentence works, if what you're writing works without the signal phrase as a sentence, then you want to add the comma. If you absolutely need Smith writes in there, then you don't use a comma. So if I wrote Smith writes that he, quote, sketched an outline of a tree, I wouldn't have a comma after Smith writes. So it takes a little bit of a practice, but think about, is the signal phrase essential to the sentence working as a sentence? If so, you don't need the comma. Is the signal phrase not essential to the whole thing standing alone as a sentence? Then you do use a comma. Again, the period goes at the end of the whole thing. That's really important. The period, oftentimes people will type it here, and that's not correct. It goes outside the end parentheses. Now, if you don't have a signal phrase, for whatever reason, stylistically, you've decided not to use one in that sentence, then you include the author's name in your parenthetical citation. All right? Notice that we have author and page, but we don't have, say, PG as an abbreviation. There's no comma between the author's name and the page number. That's how it works in MLA. Other systems do it a little bit differently. It's important that you use this for summary, paraphrase, and quotes every single time. If your first paper looks like it has too many, I can show you places where you can get rid of them without getting into any kind of murky waters, but for now, just get in the habit. If it's not your idea, it has a signal phrase, it has an in-text citation. There are a couple of situations where it's going to look a little bit different. So let's say I need to change a word in the quote. Or let's say I want to get rid of some words at the quote. This might be words at the beginning, this might be words at the end, this might be words in the middle. If I have a complete sentence and I take the sentence out before it, I don't need to do anything about it. If I have a complete sentence and I take the sentence out afterwards, I also don't need to. If I have 3 sentences and I take out the second one, I need this. So it's called an ellipsis, ... So it's a period, space, period, space, period. And it's an ellipsis. It tells readers I've taken something out of this quote. Okay. I also can add brackets. All right. So brackets are going to let me change a word. It's going to let me clarify or add something. So a bracket says I've changed or added something to the quote. So the original quote was remember, because it was I remember. And I, for the structure of my sentence, wanted it to be in third person. So I was able to add brackets around the things that I've changed. So his and remembers. So I've added brackets and ellipsis. All right. Another time when you might have something that's a little bit different than your typical quote is called a block quote. So some of you are going to find really well stated, interesting ideas, and there's just no way to cut it shorter than 3 lines. So if that's my situation, and I find a quote and it's like, nope, I can't paraphrase it, I can't cut it down, I can't break it up, because that's the first thing you should try to do. But if this is just the perfect quote and it's absolutely wonderful and it's 3+ lines, you need to put it in a block quote format. So if you haven't heard of that, this is an example of it. You can also look it up in the index to your book and see some examples there. A block quote is going to be a 1/2 inch indented. So this is the sentence that I'm ending with, and then I have my quote. It's a 1/2 inch the whole way down, okay? Notice that it's double spaced, and there are no quotation marks. Right? That might look like a quotation, it's for 1/2 inch. There's no quotation marks on a block quote because the blocking is what tells people that it's a quote. So the quote runs all the way to your right margin, each line runs all the way to the right margin, but it begins indented 5 spaces or 1/2 inch, and the whole thing is double spaced. No extra spacing, just double spaced. And then your next sentence is just gonna begin right at the end, right at the left hand margin of the next line. Okay, so those are 3 special things. One, if you lose words or phrases, you need an ellipsis. If you add words or phrases, you need brackets. And if it's a long quote, 3+ lines, you need block quote format. Now, a lot of times, when you're researching online, things aren't going to be this easy, because when I have a book, I have an author and I have a page number, almost always. Occasionally there's not an author. You might find that there is no author. So sometimes if I'm looking at a newspaper, it might be an op-ed and there's no author. So what do I do then? I use a brief version of the article or page title. Page title might be, if I'm on FDA and I looked up tanning, page title might be tanning. Of course, in that case, the FDA is my author, but that's a whole other story. We'll look at that later. So that's what we're going to do. If you have a page number available and you don't have an author's name, just put a short version of the page title, article title, in quotation marks. That's important. The only things that get italicized in MLA are book titles, or maybe play titles, particularly of regular things. There are some website names that get italicized. Nothing gets underlined anymore, so that's another important thing to remember. There's no underlining, because so much stuff gets read online now that when people see something underlined, they imagine that it's a hyperlink and try to click on it. So we got rid of underlining. If there's no page number, don't invent one. Ask your instructor in other classes that use MLA. Some will want a paragraph number. I don't want a paragraph number, so just use the name. Okay, so if there's no page number, you can't use it. Now, what happens if there's no author and there's no page number? This happens all the time on online websites. So again, if you're on the CDC website, Centers for Disease Control, you can use that as a corporate author and list the CDC here. But if there's just no author at all, it's unclear who wrote the page, then just use a brief version of the title of whatever it is you're looking at. Okay, so this might happen if it's a magazine article, if it's an online article, just use the brief version of the article. When I say brief version, it's because we don't want to fill up the whole paper with long titles. So if this was called like the bike ride that changed my life forever, you don't have to type that whole thing out, just a short version, right? There's a lot more information on this on page 265 and 266. It's going to tell you, like, well, what do I do if my article has 6 authors? Because that happens, especially when you're looking at scientific or psychological research, or even sociological research. People work in teams, so you're going to have to look at, what do I do then? Your book also calls these in-text citations parenthetical references. So just so you know, those two things are interchangeable. Again, a lot of this, if you have a book, you're going to have a page number and an author. A lot of these other instances are when you're looking at newspapers, online articles, websites, and things like that. That's when you're going to encounter these times when you're not going to have access to all the information that you wish you had. All right. So part of what I think about when I think about how to incorporate evidence into my work is the punctuation. So we talked about the punctuation. But we need to go beyond that too. It's important. We have to get the format right. We have to let people know we're going to say something. A lot of teachers refer to this method of incorporating evidence into a paper as a sandwich. All right. So the top bun of a sandwich, or in this case bread, is the signal phrase. That's where I say, according to researcher Bob Evans, or Smith writes, or a prominent researcher in economics argues. Those phrases are the things that give me credibility. If I'm writing about the economy and I'm citing an economist, I want to tell my readers that that's what I'm doing. So I might say, according to prominent economist Bob Janes. That's my signal phrase. That's the top. That's what I want to start with most of the time. Obviously, if you're using the same author in multiple sentences in one paragraph, that signal phrase doesn't have to be there every time, but you can use signal phrases in different places. You might say, we are certainly in a recovery, Smith says. It can go at the end. The middle part, the fillings for your sandwich, are the quote, the paraphrase, the summary. This is the information you've chosen from your sources that you think best explains, exemplifies, or illustrates some point you want to make in your paper. All right, so that's that middle part. And at the end, you don't want to eat a sandwich without a bottom bun. It's going to get pretty messy. Your in-text citation. All right, just get in the habit. Everything gets an in-text citation. Again, as I said, if you have the author and page number, that's what goes there, unless you've used the author's name in the sentence, and then just the page number. If you don't have a page number, don't include it. If you don't have an author's name, include a brief version of the title of whatever it is that you're looking at. Again, this is really important. When you're finished, what you have is your evidence for your paper. This is the background. This is the evidence. These are your reasonings. This is the kind of stuff that's going to convince people to listen to you, even though you're just a college student. I shouldn't say just a college student, but if I was writing about the economy and I'm a college student, I want to show that I've read some stuff beyond just my own personal experience. The thing is, if I am eating a sandwich, that's all well and good. That's fine. It gets me by. But most of us want something on the side, right? And since several of you are writing about obesity problems in America, I chose an apple. So what goes on the side is a follow-up sentence. Okay, so after we've done top bun, signal phrase, middle, fillings, your quote, paraphrase, or summary, and your bottom bread, the in-text citation, I want something on the side, a follow-up sentence. This is what tells me, this is what tells your readers, why did I just tell you that? Why did I just mention something about the economy? Why did I just give you that statistic? How does it connect to my paragraph point? Because again, one main point per paragraph. How does it connect to the point that I'm making in my paragraph? Do I want you to agree with it? Do I disagree with it? Does it explain something I'm trying to say? If it was really complicated, can I say what it said? Can I restate it in simpler terms by connecting it? That's a follow-up sentence. Remember, if you don't understand a particular quote, don't use it in your papers. Your readers aren't going to, it's not magic. They aren't going to understand it and just think you're smart. Use evidence you understand so that you can explain it to readers. All right? Again, these are the basics of in-text citations. Always be careful with your punctuation. Include a signal phrase and include citations and follow-up sentences, and you should do just fine.